Are you ready for a career upgrade? One where you are valued and respected for your expertise, where you get to use your strengths every day, where you're doing work that matters, where you have healthy boundaries, and where you're paid really freaking well. And not only that, but you get to use your privilege to open doors and support others in their pursuit of their own upgraded careers? Well, if that sounds good, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Nicole Case, and after a decades long career in corporate HR, I'm sharing my behind the scenes insider knowledge on how you can upgrade your own career and succeed in this wild corporate world. Each episode will have practical, actionable takeaways that you'll be able to implement right away with some healthy doses of encouragement and maybe a kick in the pants or two. Plus, you'll hear from other amazing women who have upgraded their own careers on their terms. So pour yourself a favorite beverage and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the Upgraded Career Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Case, and today we are talking about how to actually prepare for your performance review. And let's face it, most of us out there, we're just winging it. And that's totally cool for most things in life, but your performance review is not something you should wing. Like we should have some preparation around this, right? And I know that performance reviews get a bad rap. I totally get it. Believe me, I worked in HR for over 11 years and I actually managed this process for the majority of the companies that I worked for. And they often are not valuable. They're time consuming. Sometimes they're not even accurate. They're full of bias. Or maybe your company doesn't have a process at all. Again, I get it. This is not everyone's favorite thing to think about, to talk about. It's not everybody's favorite activity to do at work. But the truth is that no matter if your company has a formal process or not, how frequent the conversations are or whatever, at some point your performance is going to be evaluated, and it's often used to make some really big decisions about your career, whether you like it or not, right? So it's really important to take this process seriously and be proactive about it, and just to really sit down and spend a little bit of time prepping for it, because again, some really big decisions or some things can really big things can really come out of this conversation. So why is this important? Well, once again, this is how raises and promotions and bonuses are often decided. Many companies couple their performance review discussions with their compensation, and it might not even be the same timing. You know, you might have your performance conversation, say in December, but you don't see a raise or your promotion until, say, the end of Q1 the following year. And that's okay. But again, your performance is going to be evaluated somehow. And it's usually used to make these decisions around, again, raises, promotions, bonuses, those kinds of things. So it's really important that we put a little bit of time and effort into making sure we're showing up and ready to have this really important conversation. Secondly, it shows that you care and that you're proactive about your career and your performance. For people out there who are just like, this doesn't matter, this, I don't really care about this, I'm not going to spend some time on this. That could translate into you being viewed as, again, someone that doesn't really care all that much about their career or how they're doing. And if that's true for you, then that's okay. If you're cool with, you're like, I know I'm performing well. I don't really care about this conversation. I don't care about any of this, corporate, BS or whatever. Like, I get that. And if you're cool with where you're at and how things are going, then that's fine. But I suspect you're not cool with it. Or again, you want to upgrade your career in some way. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast. But again, by you taking this approach where you're being proactive, it's just sending a message to your boss and to your leadership team that this is something that's important to you, that you want to be recognized and rewarded appropriately for the work that you're doing and for the value that you're bringing to the table. And just a really simple way to show that you're being proactive is, again, just to be prepared for this conversation. The third reason why it's so important to be just ready and prepared for your performance review conversation is that you want to be able to drive the conversation the way you want to drive the conversation. You want to be able to control this narrative as much as possible. Now, there's going to be a push pull here because obviously your boss is going to want to control the narrative and drive the conversation the way they want. But by you coming in really prepared and having, your own agenda, your own things that you want to make sure are covered, then again, your boss is going to see that like, oh, they're ready to go, and you're able again to make sure you're covering the topics that you want to cover. I mean, like how many times have we been in meetings where we're just like, "Oh man, I forgot to mention this part or this was a big thing and whatever, I forgot about this thing or whatever." Again, if you are prepared and you're ready, you're going to make sure that you're going to cover again all of the topics, or you're going to be able to highlight all the things that you want to highlight in that conversation if you have just given it some time to sit down and prep for it. And also, let's be clear, these are not always super fun conversations. Frankly, they can be kind of awkward conversations. And just by spending some time preparing and prepping, you can feel way more confident going into this conversation that again can sometimes feel really awkward or feel really unnatural. So you just preparing and like feeling like you have your ducks in a row, you have all of your information, that you don't feel like you have to like rely on your memory, which is definitely not the way for me to go. I definitely need to take notes and like brings at least some bullet points or something like that to the conversations just to make sure again I feel confident that like I know what I'm talking about. I have all of my points that I want to make sure that I get across. This will also reduce the likelihood of a surprise for you or your boss, right? By again making sure that you're like, okay, let me sit down and kind of review everything and get everything together that I want to make sure gets highlighted and gets covered. It can really reduce again a surprise that like you were missing something, that you didn't hit a goal, that you didn't realize that you had, or again, or for your boss as well, because you have sat down and you're covering all of your bases. Also, whenever you're just in this conversation that you've spent some time preparing for, you're able to more clearly articulate your value. That's funny that I just kind of flubbed that sentence talking about clearly articulating your value. Again, if you sit and you prep a little bit more, you're able to clearly articulate your value in this conversation. Having a really good strong performance review, getting the rating that you want if your company still does ratings, getting that promotion, getting that raise, those kinds of things. It's not just here's a checkbox of all of the things that I did this year. It's not just about, hey, here are the goals and here's how I performed against those goals. Again, kind of like this idea of just a checkbox. That's that's just the price of entry, right? Like that's just table stakes when it comes to getting to that next level or really being viewed as that top performer. It's about your ability to actually talk about what it means that you achieved those goals. What was the impact of you, um, you know, hitting those deliverables or delivering those outcomes, right? You have to be able to actually talk about that value and really pull all of those things together. And let's face it, not all of our managers are super strong managers. That happens, unfortunately, but you're not. You're a strong manager. If you're a manager out there, you're a strong one, but not all of them are, right? And, how many of us have had what I like to call ding dong managers? Like, they're great people, they try, but they're just like, maybe they don't know how to conduct a performance review, or maybe they just aren't paying attention or whatever, right? You might have a ding dong manager and they might not just be able to, you know, really just truly see the value that you're bringing. And also too, let's be clear, they have other employees that they have to do performance reviews on. And again, in this world of do more with less, they're likely overtaxed. They likely have way too many people reporting to them. They likely have responsibilities they probably shouldn't have being a manager, but they're busy too, right? So sometimes it's hard for them to kind of see all of that detail, and by you prepping and coming to the table like having this narrative and having this story, you're going to be able to, again, really clearly connect the dots and really talk about the impact that you've made that really differentiates yourself from everybody else in the organization. So that's why it's so important to really prepare for these important conversations, regardless of how awkward or how frustrating or time consuming this whole process can feel. But let's talk about how to prepare. Now, I'm not saying that this should take you weeks to do, maybe a couple of hours to really sit down and really kind of gather all of this together. Again, I'm not trying to add another big, huge project to your to-do list, but I do think this is really, really valuable time spent to really take a couple of hours, over a weekend or, a little bit here and there during your workday to kind of pull all of this together. Typically, if your company has a process, they're giving you a timeline on when you should be sitting down and making sure you're working through this. But if not, these are things that you should be, trying to gather and pull together on a regular basis anyway. So how do you prepare? First, sit down and just review your job description. When was the last time you dusted that thing off, right? Take a look at that job description, or some companies call them work plans, or, maybe if you've been hired in the last year or so, maybe you have a copy of the job description that they use to hire you on. And I get it, roles change and evolve over time, and that's okay. But it's important just to know what you were hired to do. What are they paying you to do? And making sure that those things line up, making sure you're not missing a piece of the work that you should be doing. I actually can't tell you how often that happens. That, like, for whatever reason, like, you'll go back and you'll look at your job description, you're like, "Wait, I was supposed to be doing that? What? I was supposed to be doing that?" Or what actually more often happens is that you look at your job description and you find that you're doing a lot more things than what you were originally supposed to be doing. Or, again, you end up being in a role where it ends up being catch-all, and you end up taking on a bunch of other work that, for a multitude of reasons, right? It could be, there were layoffs, or somebody left the organization and they didn't replace them, or just, again, the business grew and evolved over time, and just this role just needed to continue to grow and evolve, and it just looks very different now. So I think it's still worth, again, digging up that job description, digging up that work plan, and kind of taking a look at it, just to kind of see, just to kind of compare to what it was that you have been hired to do versus what you're actually doing today. So that's the first step. The second is to, again, brush off that goal sheet. Go back and take a look at those goals that you set either at the beginning of the quarter or the beginning of the year, and just review how did you do? What do those look like? What were those goals? Did you forget about a goal? Are you working on goals that aren't included on your goal sheet? This was actually, again, what's more likely to happen. What I experienced, at least in my career, is that we often, as companies, don't set really great goals at the individual level. There's some roles that are really great at this, and some companies are better at this than others. But more often, I would see that we didn't set really great goals at that individual level, and we just kind of went about our day and kind of and did the work that, we kind of formally or informally knew we needed to be working on. But then it got to performance review season. We were like, oh crap, we gotta have to, like, back into this, right? So take a look at that goal sheet that you created either at the beginning of the year, beginning of the quarter. See how, kind of see what's on there. Make sure that you have been, working towards those goals, and make sure you add any additional goals that kind of came up throughout the year, which again happens, right? Your goal sheet should be a living, breathing document, because business changes and evolves, and just situations change so often throughout the year that you want to make sure that you are getting credit, I guess, quote unquote, getting credit for all the work that you're doing. So again, if you find that there's something that you've been working on, or an achievement that you've hit, or some sort of a deliverable that wasn't on that goal sheet originally, make sure you get it on there so that you can make sure that you're recognized for that. And so once you kind of review your goals, then you have to actually take the step to evaluate your own performance against those goals. Like, really sit down and do some reflection here. Now, this is probably where you're going to spend the most of your time, really doing some deep reflection on just how are you doing against your goals, and making sure that you're giving yourself credit for all the stuff that you're doing. Again, not just the things that are specific on that goal sheet or in that job description. we also want to call out the what and the how. So it's not just, again, those deliverables or those outputs or those metrics that you're hitting. It's also how you're delivering those, right? If you're getting really great feedback from customers, or, again, you're delivering all of this in a way that is timely, and you're not waiting to the last minute and causing a fire drill to happen in order for you to deliver all of the great work that you do. So the behavioral part, those characteristics, or those values that you're actually living every day, that also matters in your performance review as well. And I would argue, and I certainly argued a lot when I worked in HR, that the how oftentimes trumped the what even more, because again, you could be the top salesperson, and I experienced this in HR. You could be the top salesperson and totally crushing your number and bringing in all kinds of great revenue and money for the organization. But if you're a jerk, or if are doing this in an unethical way, like you're lying to your customers in order to get the sale, or again, you're just bulldozing people over to get out of your way just to, again, achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve, like that's not top performance, right? That's not top performance at all. I remember specifically in when I worked in HR at a high-tech company years ago. I remember being in what's called these calibration sessions, where the leaders all get together and talk about their teams, because again, budgets are not infinite, and they have to kind of duke it out, for the lack of a better term, on what team is going to get the, different, budget allocations, how many promotions are we going to have, and all of that. And so the leaders all get together and talk about this. And I remember very vividly talking about a particular technical person. So it was an engineer on a team. He was really, really technical, brilliant at what he did, but he hoarded information. He did not share his best practices. He wasn't sharing, kind of just some technical information and some learnings that he had. And a value at that organization, and a value in particular with that leader, was that you don't gatekeep or hoard information. And we would see that a lot in at the time, we would see that a lot in that organization and in that tech space, because people want to, make themselves indispensable, right? Which is totally something that I would share with you as a coach, right? Like, what is it that you do that's different than everyone else? How are you showing up in your authentic way? What's that secret sauce for you? But it's not about, again, withholding information from other people because you're hoping other people fail, or you're withholding information because you're you're intimidated, or you're scared that someone is going to surpass you in their career because you gave them some information, right? So that particular leader did not like that about that particular individual, and gave him a lower rating, said, "No, that's not okay with me. This person, constantly keeps things to themselves. They don't share. They're not out there trying to help and be a team player, and to, help share best practices." And again, that was an expectation, particularly at the level that person was. They expected, and they had this written into the job description as well, that a technical engineer at that level was expected to turn around and mentor and guide and coach and support the earlier career engineers, on their way up into their career. And again, that particular engineer did not do that. And that leader was like, "No, they're not getting a top rating. That is not what top performance looks like at this level." And and so again, the what and the how is so important. So I don't want you to diminish the fact that you're showing up every week and every day, and you are delivering amazing value for your organization, but also in a way that is supportive and empathetic of other people, and you are a team player, and also, right, you've got good boundaries, and you're not giving away your power or anything like that. But again, you are showing up in a way that feels really good to you, and you're delivering in a way that differentiates you, because you are doing it in a way that exemplifies the amazing values that you have every day. So let's make sure that you are highlighting, again, both the what and the how. Then the other thing for you to be thinking through, and this also might take you a little bit of time, is to collect some feedback. If maybe part of your performance evaluation process is gathering feedback from your peers, from other stakeholders, that could be part of the process. But if it's not officially part of the process, I mean, that I recommend you going out there and seeking some of that feedback if that makes sense. Now, a really easy way to do this throughout the year is to just create this, what I used to call a yay me folder in my email. And anytime I got kudos from either a customer or a stakeholder or a colleague, I just kind of file it away into that file folder. And, that's when I would bring it out on days where maybe I was having a rough day, or to give me just a little bit of a little bit of a pump up. Or again, during your performance review cycle, you're able to share all of this really great feedback that you've gathered throughout the year. So make sure that you're going out there again. Maybe you've got some customer feedback that you can share. Again, go back through some of your emails, where somebody gave you a really great kudos or a thank you. Again, start gathering some of that information and hold that into a place. Then to take a look at, are there any areas for improvement? So maybe there was a mistake that you made in the last quarter or the last year. Or again, maybe there's just some goals or some places that you just weren't hitting the mark in the ways that you were hoping that you would. And it's it's not going to be helpful for you to put your head in the sand or to try and ignore those things, ignore their shortcomings, or just to try to brush those aside, because I promise you your boss is probably going to bring them up, right? So it is definitely going to be better if you identify any of those areas ahead of time and you're just super open and self-aware about, hey, you know what? I didn't hit the mark on this one, or I made a mistake over here. And kind of like we talked about earlier with identifying those goals, identifying not only just the output but the impact that you hitting those goals and hitting those metrics had. Let's talk about the learnings that you had in any of these areas where maybe you struggled a little bit, or there was a mistake, or you didn't hit the metric or you didn't hit the goal exactly how it was spelled out. What is it that you learned? What did you take away from that experience? How have you adjusted things or changed things over time to make sure you didn't that didn't happen again? I'll give a really great example. When I was in HR several years ago, you know, numbers are not my thing, spreadsheets are not my thing. I get really drained of my energy when I have to live in spreadsheet land all day. And one particular job that I had, it was just I was in spreadsheets a lot. I was doing a lot of data analysis and just dealing with spreadsheets and sending them back and forth a lot, and just not a lot of fun for me. But I remember it was the end of the year, and I had done an analysis of some people's salaries and their jobs, and it turned out at the end that we needed to reclassify these employees at a different level, and which meant there came a salary increase along with that, which was really exciting. And so we were pulling together the spreadsheet and all of the information to share with the managers so that they could go and communicate that. And then I also needed to send that final spreadsheet on once everything was ticked and tied and we all said that, yep, we're good to go. I needed to then send it on to the payroll team so that they could update the payroll system and get everybody their raises in their checks, in their paychecks. And I sent, kind of this spreadsheet back and forth to a couple of different people. And I remember the leader that I was supporting, the vice president that I was supporting and his team, he called me at like 9 o'clock at night, and he was in California time and I'm in East Coast time. So it was like dinner time for him, and it's 9 o'clock, and he knows where I live. So he knows what time it is. And he never calls me on my cell phone, but he called me on his cell phone and he goes, "Nicole, do you know what you just did?" And I was like, "Oh crap. What?" And he goes, "You just sent a spreadsheet to the managers with all of their information on it as well. So now that whole team all knows what their salaries are and what their raises are all going to be, instead of just sending the individual contributor spreadsheet to them. And I was like, "Oh shit." Now we can have a whole separate conversation about pay transparency and all of that stuff, but this was like 10 years ago, and I can tell you that we were not talking about pay transparency at that time, particularly in this company. And I was like, "Oh shit, I just sent a spreadsheet with information about people's salaries on it that I should not have sent." And I'll never forget that. And I felt so fortunate that that leader was really understanding that it was a mistake. It was a oversight and whatever. And I fixed it, and sent an email back with the proper spreadsheet in there, and said, "Hi, I apologize that I sent the wrong spreadsheet earlier. And I hope that everyone can be mature enough to not continuing to look at that or to distribute that spreadsheet to anyone else. Also, if this is raising any questions, feel free to come talk to me and we'll talk directly about any questions that you might have." And after that, I figured out in Excel how to put a put a password, how to password protect spreadsheets. And again, spreadsheets are not my thing. Like this isn't my jam, right? Like I don't know all the cool ins and outs. And especially at that time, I was really early in my career at that time, so I definitely did not know the ins and outs. But I'll tell you, that day I learned how to put a password on a spreadsheet, and I never again would I ever send a spreadsheet in an email or in Slack or in a message to anyone without with really sensitive information in there without putting a password on it, so that if I did send the wrong thing, I could very quickly change the password to that spreadsheet, and then people can no longer get into it. So mistakes are going to happen. Nobody's perfect. And it's just really important to call out, to say, "Hey, I'm self-aware enough and I'm reflective enough here to recognize that, yeah, I've made a mistake this year, or again, I didn't hit the goal, and kind of this was what was going on. This was what was preventing me from hitting that goal. And this is what I've learned, and maybe adjustments or things that I have changed as a result of that." That is definitely going to help you go much further than, again, trying to just pretend that it didn't happen, or pretend that, again, just kind of brush it to the side. Cause again, your boss is going to bring it up. Or if your boss doesn't bring it up, somebody else is going to bring it up because somebody else probably noticed, or somebody else is probably looking at it. And it's going to be much more powerful for you, again, to just address it right from the get-go. So, the last two things for you to think about as you are preparing for your performance review is really thinking about what it is that you want moving forward. So, we've spent a lot of time doing lots of reflection in the past, but the past has already happened. The past is behind us. We cannot change anything about that. But now we need to think about what it is that you need support with now moving forward. And you also want to think about, what are your career goals moving forward? Like we talked about last week's episode about talking about your desire for a promotion. This is the time in this conversation, in this performance review conversation, this is the time to start talking about what it is that you need support with moving forward. What are your career goals moving forward? What is it that you're looking for? And how can your boss help you with this moving forward? That should be a good chunk of the conversation. Now, again, depending on how your boss wants to structure it, depending on how your organization structures things, these might be two separate conversations. And a lot of times I would encourage managers basically to have three separate conversations. One is a past conversation, just to yeah, again, the actual performance review, to review the past performance. And then I would encourage them to have a kind of compensation type of conversation, if that was coupled together with your performance review, the next day or whatever. Then you can have a separate conversation about the compensation part of things. Because what I would say to leaders is that a lot of times, people are like, wah, 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 don't really care what you're having to say. We just want to hear about what is my raise this year. And so they don't hear anything else in the conversation. So having those two separate conversations, and then again, maybe having a third separate conversation about your career goals moving forward and what support you need moving forward. that can be a really great way to structure these conversations. But again, I think all of this comes together whenever we are prepping for kind of just this overarching discussion around our performance and just how we're doing and our career. So again, really being reflective and sitting down and thinking about what is the type of support do you need? Do you need some more training? Do you want to go to a conference this year? Maybe one of your goals is to get on stage and speak and represent the organization at a really big industry conference. Well, what is it that you need in order to prepare you for that, right? Do you want some support going to a Toastmasters? Do you need to work with the marketing team to work on some presentation assets for that? Do you need their support, again, financially to get you to that conference? Or again, are there some training or is there anything else that you need? And again, if we're talking about budget spend or money, the more in advance that you can ask for those things, the easier it's going to be to plan for them in the future. So, and again, even if it's not just, you know, financial support or anything like that, it might just be, hey boss, I need you in my corner in this way. This is what I need more from you. This is what I need less from you. Again, what is the type of support that you need? Now, again, a really strong manager should be regularly asking this of you. But if they aren't, if this isn't just not on top of their radar, or again, they're just expecting you to come to them with what it is that you need, this is definitely the time to sit down and be thinking through what is that support that you need from them right now. And then again, what are those career goals moving forward? What is it that you're looking for? What's a sort of experience that you're hoping for? Is there a specific project that you're interested in? Is there a process that you think is, that needs changed or needs updated, and you want some support to go and work on that? Again, do you specifically want a promotion? This is the time to talk about that. So this is the time to sit down and kind of craft that, think about what are those career goals moving forward in the next year so that you can be having that conversation now instead of later on in the year when it might be too late to be kind of moving that needle forward. So that is why it's important and how to prepare for your performance review this year. Again, I'm releasing this kind of early in the fiscal year in Q2, and your fiscal year might be different than a calendar year. Maybe you have mid-year performance reviews that you need to get prepared for. But regardless, this is something that comes up with my clients all the time about just ensuring that they are prepared and ready to have a really strong performance review conversation. Again, there could be a lot at stake here. And even if your company doesn't do formal performance reviews, I encourage you to set up something with your manager anyway. Let them know that you want to have a conversation about your performance and where you stand. Again, you're going to hear this. You hear me say this almost every week, I swear. But it's so true, though. No one cares about your career more than you do. So if you aren't getting the feedback that you need, or you're not getting the visibility you need to continue to move up, then you have an obligation to yourself to take matters into your own hands and schedule this time yourself. So that's it for this week. Next week, we're actually going to talk about how to prepare and conduct valuable performance reviews for your team. If you are the people leader in this scenario, we're going to flip the script and we're going to talk about it from your perspective as the leader, what you need to be doing in order to, again, ensure that you're giving your employees amazing feedback. Next week, we're going to talk about all of that if you are a people leader. So make sure you tune into that. And in the meantime, just remember, your career deserves an upgrade.